Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Pit Talk, pulling pits and opinions with your host, Gunny G on the mic. We back, ladies and gentlemen. After this PCS, we are back. We got some good topics, as you heard. Follow us, like us, subscribe us everywhere you get your podcasts. And if you got social media, hit me up everywhere. Free game for questions, concerns, moans, got complaints, send them on, DM me, anything like that. Ladies and gentlemen, we had some good guests the last couple of weeks. We had the Barracks Barber, we had Joey Nguyen, and now we have an even more near and dear special guest hailing in from San Diego. His name is Randall Parks, a.k.a. the First Sergeant, right? Randall, can you hear me?
I can hear you, brother.
Absolutely. Sweet. Hey, we're gonna go informal. I'm gonna call you Randall, not First Sergeant. Wink, wink.
Please do.
But I'm sure you would like the First Sergeant, right? But
No, I'm good.
Hey, Randall, go ahead and introduce yourself, man, and tell them what you're doing now after the Marine Corps. Brief duty stations, here and that. Anything you want to give them.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Randall Parks. As Israel just mentioned, I do live here in San Diego, California. It is America's most beautiful city. I grew up here in Southern California. I graduated high school in 2001, and I joined the Marine Corps in July of 2001. So for those of you that remember, September 2001 happened while I was in recruit training. So while I was in recruit training, I was on the shooting circles when we found out that the United States was under attack. So obviously, the trajectory of the things that I thought that I was going to be doing when I initially joined the Marine Corps, I thought I was going to be going on the Mew. I thought I was going to be going on the booze cruise, hitting livo ports, having a good time. All that changed pretty much overnight. Now, obviously, when you join the Marine Corps, there's an understanding that at some point you're probably going to get on the 2A gun range. So it wasn't like it was unexpected. But anyway, I did 20 years in the Marine Corps. Throughout that time, I served in various units. My first duty station was in Security Forces Company, Bangor, Washington, which is where you're at now. I served at 1st Recon Battalion. I was a founding member of Marine Special Operations Command, specifically 1st Marine Special Operations Battalion on Pendleton. I was there for 5 years. Then I got orders to South Carolina to be a drill instructor on Parris Island. I did that for 3 years. And then I went to 2nd Recon Battalion on Camp Lejeune. And then I finished up my career on MCRD San Diego. Throughout my 20-year career, I attended various schools, obviously all the PME schools. I was an infantryman when I first came in. Then I lat moved to be a parachute rigger, my 4-year mark. So that kind of put me in a whole nother trajectory. I went to jump school, free fall school, Hearst Master School, McQuiss, dive school, free fall jump master, obviously static line jump master, towards master, where I jump out of an aircraft with a 300-pound barrel attached to my body. And then I was a tandem master as well, where you jump another person. So yeah, it was a long career. Throughout that time, I found the time to wrap up my bachelor's degree in business management. And then right before I retired, I got my master's degree in business from the Marshall School of Business at the University of Southern California. So that's me.
Oh, yeah. Long story short, oh my goodness. There's a lot going on there. Hey, you said obviously like I'm supposed to know the levels of Hearst Master courses. I had no idea what you were saying for a second. I'm like, oh man, that sounds dope. I'm in the wrong MOS. That's what I was thinking at first. Hey, so Randall, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know you're doing big things out in San Diego. I can see it by your social media. Can you tell the folks a little bit about how you exited the Marine Corps, what duty station you exited, and how you know what kind of rapport do we have, what kind of relationship do we have, how do you know this guy that you're on the podcast with?
Okay. So yeah, you were one of my senior drill instructors when I checked into the special training company, which was my last company before I retired. And you were on drill instructor duty. I think you were quotaing out, right? Like that was your last, like you weren't going
That's
back to the
correct.
training company. Okay.
Right.
Um, and when I checked in there, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, you had some challenges with the current leadership.
Uh, yeah.
And
Mhm.
when I came in, I gave you a fresh start, and man, it's awesome to see where you're at now, dude. It's awesome to see that you're still in,
Yeah.
and that you're a gunny, and that you're
Yeah.
you were accomplished Marine there. I believe you were in Mike Company, correct? Before you came over to
That's
me.
correct. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
Um, so transition's kind of a funny story, man. It's one of those things that I realized probably around my 15 to 17 year mark that I needed to start preparing for, because it's at a certain point the Marine Corps and I were not going to see eye to eye, and I was going to have to exit, or the Marine Corps was going to tell me to exit, right? And I got a good story that kind of puts this all into perspective for you. So I was a first sergeant in India Company right before I came over to STC, and my sergeant major at the time, no names, my sergeant major, um, I walked into his office and he seemed upset. So obviously, being the Marine that I am, I think that I did something wrong, or at least he caught me doing something, or one of my Marines doing something, right? I was
Yeah.
like, "Hey, Sergeant Major, what seems to be the problem?" And he was super
Uh-oh.
pissed. And he's like, "Man, I just got orders to Camp Lejeune." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Well, I just got here from Okinawa like barely 2 years ago." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Well, what's the problem?" He's like, "Well, I called the monitor and he told me to call him back in like 2 months because he wasn't ready for me yet." And I'm like, "All right, well, what happened?" He's like, "Well, that was like 2 days ago, and I walk in this morning and I checked my MOL and I have orders to Camp Lejeune." So I guess what he did,
Oh.
right, is he highlighted himself in the monitor's purview and became a target of those orders, right? And
Right.
this particular sergeant major, he'd been in like 23 years. So the way it works, when you go past 20, if you get orders and you don't want to execute those orders, let's say right now it's what, August, right? And say those orders are for like November. If you
Yeah.
don't execute those orders, your retirement date is November 1st. So that was the position that he was in. And
Whoa.
I'm like, okay. So now I realize that he didn't catch me doing anything wrong. um, I'm like, well, Sergeant Major, you're at 23 years. Like, what's the problem? Why don't you just execute the orders or get out? And he's like, well, I don't want to execute the orders because my wife has a good job here. My kids are established in high school, and we just got here like 2 years ago. I'm like, okay, well, it sounds pretty simple to me. Like, just call the monitor back and tell him to get fucked. And he's like, well, I can't do that. And I'm like, well, why not? Like, who cares? You're a sergeant major. Like, get out, retire, live your life. And I was like, don't you have a plan? Can't you like fall back on something? Like, do you have a degree? He's like, no, I don't have a degree. Like, who's had time for that? And I'm like, oh my God. And so I'm standing there in Charlie's, right? So I got all my fucking ribbons and shit on. And I look down at my ribbons and I look back at him and I'm like, well, that's weird, Sergeant Major, because I found the time. And he's like, get the fuck out of here.
Oh.
And he kicked me out. So that's when I realized like I was already on the path of like finishing up. I think I had maybe like 6 months left until I finished up my bachelor's, at least my bachelor's. But that's when I realized like, hey man, you really need to start planning for this because at a certain point, you're going to get that notification in MOL and maybe your family's established and you don't want to move. Um, so that was the start of my like transition like experience.
Interesting. Let me, before we get into the meat and potatoes, because it sounds like good tea, as they would say. Uh, in terms of TRS and in terms of the VA appointments, how did you find that being a hill to climb or a valley just to cruise through?
Um, it, in my opinion, the Marine Corps does not, or the military in general, not just the Marine Corps, but the military in general does not do a good job of transitioning veterans out to the civilian world. But at the end of the day, it's not the Marine Corps' job, right? Like it's not
Hmm.
the Marine Corps'
Right.
job to prepare you to get out. The military's job is to fight and win our nation's battles. It's your responsibility to prepare to get out.
Hmm.
TRS is just a check in the box. Like
Interesting.
it's the Marine Corps to say, hey, this guy was prepared to roll out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah,
But at the end of the day, it's ultimately your responsibility because I'm telling you, like the day you leave, the day you pick up your DD 214, like it's on you. And for guys like me that were in, I joined at 18. This is all I know, right?
yeah,
Um, you got to realize that it's your responsibility. It's not the VA's responsibility either for them to make sure they capture all your ailments. You've got to go to medical. You've got to if you if you feel something, say something. If you got something wrong with you, now I get it. Like my time in the Marine Corps was spent, mostly, deploying and doing workups and things like that. So I didn't want to stop. Like and I was on jump and dive pay, so I didn't want to like get my jump and dive pay cut off, so I
yeah,
wouldn't say anything. But over the last like 3 years is when I started going to medical and putting the stuff in my record so that now that I'm out, like I just had an issue with my shoulder and I go to TRICARE and or the VA and I get it fixed and it's not a big deal. So the
yeah.
onus is on you to make sure you get all that stuff done. TRS was decent. It was a decent. I got hooked up with the DAV who prepared all my whole VA claim. It was seamless and it's a nonprofit. It's free for all veterans. So I
Wow.
highly recommend the DAV. At least the one here in Miramar
Yeah.
was phenomenal.
Dope. That's awesome. So, was it could it have done a little bit more in terms of more networking per se? Like, hey, I've heard that the TRS program is a again, it's a check in the box as you would say, and they should probably do a little bit more in terms of networking you with individuals that actually can make it happen for you. Does that make sense?
You know, TRS is 5 days long. I think the
Yeah.
executive program or whatever is like a couple more weeks or whatever. Um, but you're not going to do networking in 5 days.
Mm.
Networking again is on you. Um, about 3 years before I retired, I started going to this program here or not program, but organization here in San Diego called the Veterans Beer Club. And it was awesome. Like you show up, you throw on like a blue name tag, you write your name down on there. That means that you're a veteran that's looking for a job. And there's people that
Okay.
show up there that throw on a red name tag that write down what company they work with. And they're either looking to hire a veteran or they're looking to mentor you and give you like some advice. So there's like some grassroots like organizations out there that you show up and it's just an endless stop of like industry discovery and just trying to figure out like, hey, because what does every military member say they're going to do? Or at least on the officer side, they're all what? They're all program managers. Every single one of them is going to do program management. Well, maybe you should talk to a
Yeah.
program manager And you can do that at one of these type of events where you show up, throw on a name tag, grab a beer, and just go talk to other veterans. And it was really beneficial to me to get their perspective.
Oh, nice. Okay, so again, you are correct. I agree with you in terms of you take ownership, right? Because nobody's going to care about your transition more than yourself, and definitely
Exactly.
you want to help yourself, not only yourself, but you got to prepare your family, right? That's a potential, because if your family's not established, then you should definitely want to be looking forward, long term, short term, whatever the case may be. But it
Yeah.
sounds like you were well prepared when that day came, and you were just kind of in out of one and into the other, and each of them had their cons, but pros and cons. But it sounds like you had a smooth transition outside a retirement. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So I've said this before a couple of times. The only thing that I was concerned about the day I retired, the day I delivered my retirement speech, was what am I going to do with my hair? What, like, am I going to do the side part? Am I going to slick
Okay.
it back? Ah, am I going to grow it long, like Bodhi status, Like, I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
That was my only concern because I was prepared. And that should be every veteran's goal, minus the guys that can't grow hair. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you grow your facial hair. You don't know what you're going to do with it. Um,
Ah,
but,
that's
dude,
good.
if you're going to hang your hopes on TRS, like, you're going to fail, dude. Like, the guy
Yeah,
that
yeah.
teaches TRS is going to sit up there and speak at you about transition when they never transitioned. They literally were Sergeant Major Master Guns one day, and they were GS 9 with khakis and a goatee the next day. Like, so they never went into like the civilian world, and they never, most of them. All right, so don't hang your hat on
Nice.
TRS.
That's good. That's good. That's a good tool for the toolbox, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't heard that, you don't. Oh, a 5 day course ain't it. Don't put your eggs all in one basket, as he would say. Um, Transitioning from the depot, can you tell us about the experience of transitioning? Right, I get the TRS, I get the VA, but the transition, like, you know what I'm talking about. I know you see
Yep.
me down there. What you're thinking, like the red carpet, salute, get you out of there, like thank you for your service, amazing 20 years. You did have that ceremony at USC though. That was dope. Wish I was there. I seen that, but it wasn't all. It wasn't all cake and eat it too. It was actually quite a bit of a disturbing experience, if you ask me. Right? Talk about
So I
my
know what you're getting at. I know what
almost
story you're referring to.
talk about my transition, and then we'll go kind of that'll piggyback off of yours. That make sense?
Yeah. So, the first thing I'll say is with transition, like if you're a veteran, like when you get out, don't expect anything. Like you are owed
Hmm.
nothing. You get a handshake. Hey, thank you for your service. Like that is at the most, that is all that you are owed. No, this is an all volunteer force. No one asked you to join. You volunteered. You did what you did. You got what you got. Um, so you're walking into an organization where you need to earn it. So I just wanted to say that up front. So my transition experience. So at around my 19-year mark, I had enrolled and was I was accepted and enrolled in the MBV program at USC. It's a veterans only program for business, and it's designed like an executive MBA program. So basically, they took an executive MBA syllabus and they threw out like all the fluff, and all you get is the meat of an executive MBA. So corporate
Hmm.
finance, accounting, marketing, entrepreneurship, negotiations, um, leadership. I mean, it is by far, in my opinion, the best thing out there for a veteran. And now there's two of them. So now there's one at USC, which is the original. It's been going for 11 years. And now Lieutenant General Keene, he launched one at Emory University on the East Coast in Atlanta.
Ooh.
So phenomenal program. So I start that program and it sucks, man. Dude, I am like out of my depth, right? Like, but I use the skills that I learned in the military, right? Like time management, you know, laying out all the do outs on the table and just figuring out how to attack it, right? So I would get up at like 4 in the morning. I was like basically back on drill instructor duty. I just back on lights, you know.
Yeah.
I'd be up at 4 in the morning. I'd study for 2 hours, and then I'd drive to work. I'd get to work. I'd go to the gym just to get my mind right or go for a run. Then I'd work all day. If I had time at lunch, I would maybe knock out a couple things here and there. And then when I got home at night, if I needed to, I would knock out some things. Other than that, I would spend that time with my family. So the program is a year long. So I started in July and I was going to graduate in May. In November, the list for Sergeant Major came out and my name was on it. And dude, I was super pumped. Like it was a long-term goal of mine to pin on Sergeant Major, and I had accomplished being selected to that rank. So the message came out on like a Wednesday or Thursday or something, and I was a pretty junior first E8, so I didn't expect to get a call from or an email or anything like that from the monitor anytime soon. So I get a call on Saturday at like I don't know, 3 o'clock my time. So it was 6 o'clock East Coast time, monitors time. And I was in corporate finance class. So I'm in
Hell yeah.
class, my phone rings, and I look at it and it's like 89.99 monitor. I'm like, oh shit. So I'm like, yeah, I got to take this. So I answer the phone. He's like, hey, First Sergeant Parks, congratulations on your selection for Sergeant Major. I'm going to send you to Cobras and Hueys on Pendleton. You good with that? I was like, yeah, that'd be great. I was like, are they deployable? He's like, yep, they deploy within the next year. I'm like, all right, sweet. And he was like, I was like, yeah, thank you, Sergeant Major. And like, he's like, all right, I was like, yeah, what unit is it? he listed off. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. He's like, any questions? I'm like, nope. He's like, all right, see you later. And he hung up. I'm like,
Oh,
okay.
cool.
So I go to Dr. Google, trying to figure out who the CO and Sergeant Major is. Turns out the Sergeant Major is a good buddy of mine. So I call him. I'm like, hey, dude, I'm coming. I think it was HMLA 169. Hey, dude, I'm coming to your unit, dude. And he's like, oh, when are you coming? I was like, he said March. He's like, well, I'm going to Bridgeport to be the Sergeant Major up there in like a month. So I need you to get here like in like 2 weeks. He's like, can you do that? I was like, dude, I could be there tonight. Because I was just on the depot, so it would be a short drive.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was like, all right, I'll call the monitor back on Monday. So I call the monitor back and he answers the phone. He's like, yeah, so thing is, yeah, I forgot I gave those orders to somebody else.
Uh,
You're going to MWSS. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is, and he's like, well, it's on Pendleton. And I'm like, well, so as he's talking, I'm looking it up. And I'm like, look, this doesn't sound like something that I'm like really interested in. And like, this is jacked up, man. And he's like, look, First Sergeant, like, I'm so sorry, man. Like, I jacked this up. Like, give me a call back in like 2 weeks. Like, I'll make it right for you. I'm like, okay, cool. So I hang up. I call my buddy, Sergeant Major Hagan. He's out now, so he's retired, so his name's good. um, and he's like, okay, man. He's like, relax. It happens. I'm like, all right, I'm good. I'm good. Even though inside I was freaking out.
Hell
And
yeah, I would be too.
so, dude, I set a reminder on my phone, and I call him at 05 my time, 08 his time.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, so he answered, and he kind of gave me that. He's like, yeah, look, man, I know I told you I'd make it up to you and I'd make it right for you, but it's needs of the Marine Corps. So you either take these orders or you can get out. And I'm like, so the same thing, like I referenced in the beginning of this podcast, same thing that happened to him was now happening to me. But
Yup.
the difference was that I was prepared for this. I was prepared for this conversation. The monitor, he was not prepared for this conversation. So I told him, I was like, look, Sergeant Major, that's not right. Like you told me you would make it right, and this isn't making it right. Needs of the Marine Corps is all I've heard for the last couple PCS moves. And he's like, well, what do you want? I was like, look, I don't want much. I just want Pendleton or Miramar, and I want to go to a unit that has more hunters and gatherers in it.
Yeah.
Like, I want to go to a unit that's going to deploy. I want to go to a unit that's going to do Marine shit. And he's like, well, you should just be grateful that I was leaving you in Southern California. I could have given you orders to anywhere else. And I was like, look, Sergeant Major, I'm not trying to be a dick here, but I was staying in California regardless of what you did. And he's like, excuse me? He's like, what makes you think you have that kind of leverage? That you can just get whatever you want? I'm like, well, I'm at 19 and a half years, so you can't make me go over 20. I can just get out in 6 months. All my medical and stuff is all done. I'm gotten it taken care of. And I'm midway through a master's program at one of the top business schools in the country. So I have options. So I can either just continue to eat from the hand that feeds me, or I can go triple my income. Like this is not a hard decision for me to make. But
Right.
how was I able to make that decision? Because look, at this point, I had taken care of myself medically, right? Um, Education was on the road to being knocked out. I already had an idea of what I wanted to do, kind of, but I knew that I would be able to lean on the network that I had built in San Diego. I knew that I would be able to lean on the USC network. And I knew that I would be fine. And he was like, all right, well, submit your appendix J. I'm like, all right, no worries. It'll be on your desk shortly. And that was it.
Oh. Okay. So it didn't go as quite as planned. You definitely wanted to go to a deployable unit. I'm there too. I'm like non-deployable after non-deployable. Again, it's my job. It's kind of in my nature, in my job, right? I get it. I understand, but it would be nice eventually to go back and do some Marine stuff. But how does that hail in comparison to my almost transition from San Diego? Can you tell me about that one?
Oh,
Let the
okay.
folks
Okay.
know
Yeah. So,
how the difference.
all right. So, if I remember correctly, you you had submitted or the paperwork didn't get to headquarters Marine Corps for your reenlistment. Like it didn't get there on time.
Oh no, it was there for a whole year. You remember? And then you got an email, and you called me after I was done PT, and you're like, Garcia, get over here. You remember that? And then
Kind
I
of.
got in
Refresh my memory.
sweaty. And so remember, I submitted for reenlistment.
Yep.
And I was waiting and waiting and waiting. I would always email me back, and no email reply from the monitor. And then I got an email. I think it was in January
That's
when
right.
my EAS was in 30 days,
Yep.
right? And we got the email at the same time, and you're like, Garcia, get over here. You're like, did you read your email? I was like, no, what's going on? And then we both read it there and then. And then
Okay.
what did I do?
Now I
I was like
remember.
that sergeant major, remember? Yeah.
Well, you were in a worse position than him because you had zero done. So yeah, I remember
Yeah.
your package had been sitting up there a long time, and for whatever reason, it just didn't move, or it got lost in the shuffle. I don't remember what the circumstance was, but anyway, your MOS ran out of boat spaces, and and obviously a lot of this had transpired before I got there, so I didn't have like the full background. But
Yeah.
but what I'm about to say to all your audience here is important under the guise of your network. Like you need to have a network both in and outside the Marine Corps because you can get what I'm about to tell you we got done. You can get it done for one of your guys, and you
Yeah.
were one of those guys.
One of
So
those guys. Yeah.
so I'm sitting there talking to him like, yeah, what's your MOS? And you're like, oh, I'm an O1. And I'm like, 1-1. I was like, who's your monitor? And you're like, Master Guns Rodriguez, and he's retired now too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, Rod's your monitor? I was like, you know what? Let me give him a call. I had his personal cell phone number on my phone.
Yeah.
So I call him
Hmm.
up and he answered on like the second ring. I'm like, hey, Rod, what's up, man? This is Parks. He's like, oh, Parks, what's up, dude? I was like, hey, look, man, how you doing? We did maybe a little small talk.
Yeah.
And then he's like, yeah, what can I do for you? I'm like, well, actually, I'm calling for a favor, man. Like, I got a Marine. He's a drill instructor. He's phenomenal. Um, you know, I've really had a great time working with him so far. And his package is being held up. And according to his email, you're out of the boat spaces. So he's like, yeah, give me your ZDIPI. So I'm like, I hear him clicking away in the background. He's like, yeah, it says here he's got like 2 pieces of negative paperwork in here. That's why he was kind of like tier 3 or whatever. I'm like, all right, hey, look, let me
Yeah.
explain. Like this guy and the past first sergeant, they didn't get along. And I think it was more of that first sergeant's problem because I haven't had any problems with Garcia since I've been here, and he's been phenomenal. Um, and he's like, okay, he's like, I don't have any boat spaces at the moment, but let me call you back. So he calls me back in like 30 minutes, and he's like, all right, brother, this is what I'm gonna do. If you say he's a good dude, then we want to retain him. So I'm gonna borrow. I think he said he was gonna borrow from the boat spaces the year ahead. And it was some waiver he had to send up to be able to do it, but he was willing to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when I pulled you in from PT and told you, hey, dude,
Oh, that's right.
you're staying in.
Yeah. Yeah. Remember on the couch? I don't know if you remember or not, but I was sitting there. It seemed like eternity. I'm not gonna lie to you, I was crying. I was like, what the frick? I just did an SDA. I'm getting a comm. I'm a highly valuable Marine, and I just completed an SDA, like highly competitive for promotion, but you can't retain me? What? I remember calling Minnie, my wife, and I just started, hey, I don't know what we're going to do. We got to go home. I was crying, blah, blah, blah.
I remember that.
What seemed like eternity. You remember that? Oh, my God. I remember, Jesus help me. That was the most intense moment of my life. And I remember at that moment in time, I realized what you realize down the road, and that Sergeant Major is, we're just a number, right? 13978974774. That's my number. I know my number by heart. I know these things, right? And not that I'm just a number. Yeah, I'm a person with associated that number, but the transition piece, if you're not ready and you put all your eggs in a basket, you're not going to be successful. There's no way that I was going to be successful without me establishing some type of rapport with you and then you going up to bat with me. How does just being a good dude in general just help that out? You were that light or knight in shining armor per se. Can you explain that?
Well, it's because, throughout my career, man, like I just treated people with respect. Like everywhere I went, as long as they deserved it, they got treated with respect. And Rod and I happened to deploy together on the first Marine Special Operations Task Force, and he was the admin chief for the SOTF. And him and I always just got along. Actually, we went to McQuist together, or not McQuist. Uh, we got our green belts, our martial arts belts together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah, our
McMahon.
McMat belts together. Yeah. And so we beat the shit out of each other for like 6 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
like you just be a good dude, man. And you just never know. So if I hadn't had that relationship with him, chances are when I called him, he would have said, hey, dude, too bad, so sad. Like, tell Garcia to pack his shit.
Yeah,
Right?
that's true. That's true.
So yeah,
How
you got to be
how does
prepared. You got to be.
that fall in?
Go ahead.
Yeah, how does that fall into? We talk about it. It's like a token keyword, token key term. Everybody talks about now. You hear it both in and out of uniform. It's a thing called toxic leadership. How did that affect your transition, and how did it almost affect mine? What type of leaders did you encounter that messed up your transition almost?
So yeah, like you said, that's a buzzword, right? So
Yeah, buzzword.
like let's define the buzzword. So toxic
Yeah,
leadership, in my opinion, is somebody within the chain, regardless whether you're at the company level, battalion level, division level, whatever, that is having sweeping negative effects both up and down the chain of command. And that could
that's
be
good.
at the squad level. Like you could have a toxic fire team leader that is just bringing down the whole squad or platoon or whatever. Obviously, when you're more senior in rank, if you're a toxic leader, those effects are bigger and wider encompassing. Um,
Yeah,
so when I checked into that company, I think there was some of that going on um, maybe at the company level. And whenever I checked into a new place, I tried to come in there and not change anything, at least for 2 weeks.
yeah,
Just take notes. Don't create any kind of sweeping changes because you need to know the environment. You need to understand the personalities. You need to understand all those things. And when I came there, I think between maybe the company commander and the first sergeant, um, there was some toxic leadership there. And I think it was because there was some stuff that had happened before I got there that they had to be a certain way to right the ship. And maybe they were doing what they thought they needed to do. And maybe they just went a little bit too far. Whereas when I checked in, it seemed like things were moving in a pretty great direction. Um, so in my opinion, that's toxic leadership. And the effect that toxic leadership can have on an organization is pretty vast. Like it affects a lot of things. It affects trust, which I think is probably the most important thing. It affects morale. It affects retention of talent. So, like in my case, the monitor was a freaking retard. Like you have a guy in front of you who wants to deploy, who is educated, who is um, who has a lot of experience, who has a top secret clearance. Like what the what the fuck? And because of your own
uh,
shortcomings, you just now shorted the Marine Corps of a good leader. And now they're going to move on somewhere else. And that
hmm,
person didn't just have that effect with me, but across the community, the 8999 community. It was very
yeah.
well known whenever people said his name, people rolled their
Oh
eyes.
wow.
So that's how you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
right? Um, so it can happen at every level. Now, let's say that you are a solid leader, you're solid, and you go into an organization where maybe the level up from you is a toxic leader and is causing problems. What is that going to then do for you? Well, you don't want your Marines below you affected by that. So what does that mean? That means that you're going to take that 50-pound freaking sandbag egg of toxic leadership and you're going to stuff it in your ruck and you're going to carry that
and,
motherfucker. And,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I experienced that as a first sergeant. I'd check in and the battalion commander was a freaking shit show and it was affecting the whole battalion. You know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about? His freaking arms all fucking shaky Jake all the time. God damn, man.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Like,
remember. I remember.
fuck, dude. And I knew that I was going to have to shoulder that burden from that guy. And
Yeah.
so the Marines could just focus on the mission and do their damn job because they only interacted with that dude like 4 times throughout the cycle, right?
Yeah.
Pickup, initial drill, final drill, and graduation. That was
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. That's right.
Or and the battalion commander inspection. Um,
Yep. That's fine.
so if you're a good leader, you need to recognize when the people above you are exercising that toxic leadership, and you need to shield your guys from it, your guys and gals from it. Um, if you're in that position of leadership and you notice that someone below you is exhibiting that toxic leadership, you need to smash them. When I checked into India Company, that's what was going on. And I couldn't put my finger on it for a while. Like I was trying to make common sense changes. I was trying to affect the culture of the place and make it better. Me and the company commander and the chief drill instructors, we collectively were trying to make it better. So it wasn't us. So I'm like, God damn, man, like where is this coming from? And then I identified the two guys, the two like kind of ringleaders in the company, and I pulled them in and I warned them. I'm like, hey, look, like you guys need to stop with the stupid crap, or you're gone. You're out of the company, and I'll send your ass on quota. I don't give a shit. And what they were doing stupid shit to the young drill instructors, man. Like it was at the end of one of my, I think it was like the end of my first cycle, and I saw these new drill instructors running around the company like in a pack. I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing? And they were going around all the cork boards in all the duty huts. They were changing out all the freaking thumbtacks to blue thumbtacks because the fucking color of 3rd Battalion was blue. And I'm like, there's 4 of them. They're looking at me and I'm like, are you fucking with me? And they're like, no, First Sergeant. I'm like, why are you doing this? I'm like, well, we were told to do it. I'm like, who? Tell me who. And he told me these 2 guys. And this was
Yeah.
after I had that conversation with them. So
Interesting.
I literally, and this was like, 8 o'clock at night. These dudes should be home with their families, man. It's the end of the cycle. Like, what the hell? So I pull these dudes in. The next morning, I'm like, hey, look, I told you that if you didn't change your azimuth, I was going to change it for you. And you're fucking gone. The end of this cycle,
Amen.
you're fucking out of here. And I sent them to like fucking routing or some bullshit. They were so pissed
Ah,
because they thought they were like legends in their own mind, but they were the
yeah,
toxic
yeah.
leadership.
Dude, I remember when I was there, you had checked in, you were creating because my boy uh Ed, he was in your company, and he's like, dude, we're freaking doing this, we're doing that, it's crazy. And I said, what? We're hiking normal without running around in like chickens cut off, no saying kid. It was just like a normal like a Marine Corps hike. I remember you guys were doing. I was like, man, that's whack. I'm sitting here slaying my body, right? Because I'm thoroughly indoctrinated in
Yeah.
love and core and country, right? Or bleeding blue for lack of better words. I remember you were affecting change, and it was creating ripples in San Diego. I remember that because all 3rd Battalion knew who First Sergeant Parks was, and they wanted to work for you. It was
Yep.
wild. I remember Mike, to include myself, I told Ed, dude, get me. I want to work for this dude. I work for this dude. You were just creating ripples, not because you were being against the grain, but you were creating a change, and it was
Yeah.
good change because you were a good dude. And I remember that because Ed would come over. You guys would be towards the latter end of the cycle, and I'd be the beginning. He'd be like, dude, I'd go over to the duty hut and be like, dog, come on, man, just put in a good word for me, homie. Like, come on, man, take me. I remember too. It
Yeah.
was dope what you were doing, Randall, and man, I hope that you still are doing it now because just being a good dude in general just takes you a long way, right? Like, what tools can you provide us that are still in that sometimes still encounter this type of leadership, right? Whether it be toxic or not, but just give us some better tools as senior leaders and as young Marines that are aspiring to be in the shoes that you once filled.
Just the golden rule, right? Like just treat people the way that you would want to be treated. That's
Yeah.
it. It's not very difficult. Like the reason I stopped the drill instructors from running on the hikes is because at the end of the hikes, the drill instructors would be fucking combat ineffective the rest of the day. Because yeah, we went on a 12-mile hike, but because those drill instructors are
Yep.
running around the platoon, those dudes just did a fucking marathon with a fucking
Yeah.
55-pound ruck.
Yeah.
So they're done, dude, for the rest of the day. And it's like, and the recruits are over there, who's the ones that are supposed to be slayed. They're over there like, when's chow, sir? You know? I'm like, fuck, if anybody should be running, it should be these fucking bitches, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, those two senior drill instructors, they had a problem with that. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, you have a problem with it. Okay, so hey, how about this? At the end of the hike, you and I, we can go run the old fucking Force Recon NDOC route. And we can do some fucking surf checks. See how you like that? And they were like, no, no, Farzan, we're good. We're good. Yeah, no shit.
Okay.
That's what I fucking thought.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, just treat people like how you would want to be treated. Be a good dude. Fulfill the core values of honor, courage, and commitment. That's it, dude. It's really that simple. You know, obviously everyone has a role to play as a first sergeant. You have a role to
Yeah.
play. You need to maintain the good order and discipline. You can have a great relationship with your Marines, and man, it's a good thing when it's good. And it was, and in any
Yeah.
company, it was so good that we had guys that were drill instructor students at DI school that were like, they like found me on Facebook or like messaging me like, hey, First Sergeant, I really want to come to your company. But that's how you know, like, you have a good thing, when people want to join your team. And
Yeah.
so,
Hell
if you're a
yeah.
young Marine and you're say you're a squad leader, an infantry battalion, and you run a great squad, and you have other squad members from other squads or platoons or companies like creeping on your position, trying to get in there, then you're doing it
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's dope. Randall, dude, I remember. Dude, can you tell them the text message? Could you just elaborate on the text message? We were getting drafted. Remember? Did you come over to the schoolhouse and be like, look, let me which one do I want? Sergeant Major, which one? Is that what you did?
No, no, man. I never like played the freaking NFL draft game. I kind of looked at,
Yeah.
like, the first thing I looked at was like capabilities, like if this guy was like a swimmer or if he was like a McQuiss already, because I had requirements that I had to fulfill as a first sergeant, providing
Yeah.
McQuiss instructors over to the pool, or if he was a McMap, and I'd look at his like PFT and stuff, but I didn't I if someone came to me and they seemed like they were a good dude, they were trainable, I would take them.
That's dope.
I had this guy who's now retired now, Gunny. How was he? No, he was a staff sergeant at the time, Staff Sergeant Elisara,
Yeah,
and
Alan. Yep.
big old Samoan dude, and
Yeah.
he looked like the fucking Rock, dude. He looked like the Rock Johnson.
Yep. Yeah, he
And
did. He did.
I went to his DI school instructor because I knew him, and I was like, "Hey, dude, what's up with this Elisara guy?" Because Elisara had came up to me while we were on the Crucible. They were observing our company, and he was like, "Hey, First Sergeant, my name is Staff Sergeant Elisara. I really want to come to your company." And he said it all like all stern and all confident and shit. And
Yeah.
he was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
he was a DI school student, but he was still kind of jacked. And I was like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you might fit the India Company mold." And then he was like, "I think you might know my uncle." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, who's your uncle?" And he's like, it's Mo Powell, Master Guns Mo Powell. Do you know him?" And Mo Powell is like he's like a legend in the recon community. And I'm like,
Oh.
"Yeah, I know fucking Mo Powell. You're related to Mo Powell?" And he's like, "Yes, for Sergeant." I'm like, "Son, I'm gonna get you into your company. Don't worry." And I turned to my company commander. I'm like, "Hey,
Hell
if this
yeah.
dude comes, because Mo and Alisara, they're both Hawaiians, and or they're
Yeah.
Polynesian, excuse me. And and I was like, hey, if this guy's in Mopal's bloodline, he's coming to us. And the DI school instructors, they were like, oh, he's he's not very fast. I'm like, I don't care. He's big as shit. He's intimidating. I want him. And he was good, man. Like Elisar was
He was a
legit.
good
He
dude.
was a good drill instructor.
Yeah. I remember because he was checking in. I think I was on my third. I was already in cycle while he checked in, and I
Yeah.
remember Al from Iwakuni, Japan, because we were stationed in Iwakuni together. He was the postal chief, and he checked in a couple months later, and I go, dude, you're over here. He goes, yeah, and I'm about to retire. This is ridiculous. They still got him close to retirement, right? Because I know he
Yeah.
retired out in San Diego, and I was like, dang, dude. But I remember him being so humble, and that was because the leadership, and that was the environment that he created. He was so humble because I was sitting there drinking the Kool-Aid for a little bit, and I remember him just running and screaming and
Yeah.
asking for things and asking for recruits and this that, and the other. I go, this dude is, and I noticed some people around, and it kind of changed my mindset, right? Because again, I was thoroughly indoctrinated in love and core
And the
country and
Kool-Aid.
indoctrinating
You're
recruits.
the Depot Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I was a Depot Kool-Aid for a little bit, and
Yeah.
I remember a couple dudes that was like, man, this is crazy. It's just because I remember when I got to STC, I was mad because I earned that coveted black belt, right? And all this and all that, and then all of a sudden that dynamic changed, and I was just Staff Sergeant Garcia, right? It wasn't like, dude, you're too deep in. There's no way you should be did this way, right? But anyways, long story short,
I
Al
think
was
I
a
remember
good dude.
telling
Al
you
was a
that.
humble dude. Right. You did because I don't know what it was. It was just Mighty Mike was like, whoa, quite an experience
You guys are
for me.
ridiculous for that shit.
Oh, it was we had the best squad mate. That's how I tell you that. But anyways, yeah, man, you were creating ripples in the San Diego. People wanted to go to you. I remember even dudes that were in cycle, they wanted to transition midway. Like, how do we make this happen to work for a good team leader, man? You were creating ripples, and I hope that you're still doing that now in the civilian sector. I know
Yeah.
that, civilian, military leadership is still leadership. You still have people that you're in charge of, or they're in charge of you. It doesn't change,
Yep.
right? And what are you doing
Doesn't
now
change.
that what are you doing now that it's affecting change, or are you in that capacity in affecting change that way?
I mean, you're always in a capacity where you can affect change at your level, whatever that may be. And I have a couple things that I'm doing currently, and like just something as simple as when something's jacked up, I speak up about it, like because closed mouths don't get fed,
Hmm.
and your civilian counterparts when you get out, they want to hear some of your perspective. Um, and just something as simple as as a Marine, you were taught if there's an issue or if there's a problem, don't just bitch about the problem, but then provide a solution.
Yeah.
And that in the civilian world is invaluable because you know everyone always complains about this or that or whatever, but when you're the one that complains but you have a solution or a recommendation, then that makes a huge difference and that sets you apart from your peers.
Yeah.
Um, so, just something to something to think about when you go to transition out. You have those skills, those soft skills that translate very well. Your degree is great, and that potentially will get you into the door or through the door for an interview. But it's you, it's your personality, it's your heart, it's your leadership, it's everything that's going to get you the job, and it's going to get you promoted within that field.
That's dope. That's good. That's good, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if you've been hearing the last hour or so, but we got Randall Parks on the mic, and again, good dude in and out, in uniform, and then now he took a Superman suit off, and now he's doing big, better things. Hey, Randall, what's your handle? Where can they reach you at? If they got questions, where can they DM you at? If they need some guidance, where can they reach you at? Let them know.
So you can find me on LinkedIn, obviously, Randall Parks. I'm the only one on there named Randall Parks.
Nice.
And then for Instagram, you can find me at Randall in San Diego. And you'll be able to find me on there. Feel free to reach out to me. Um, LinkedIn is probably the best way because the message will go directly to me. And
Nice.
I'll put some time on my calendar if you want to talk about transition or whatever. I'm always down to have a cup of coffee, as long as I can fit it in my schedule. Um, I'm always down to help another vet out because, when I was transitioning out, man, other vets helped me. And I think it's my job, my duty to kind of pay that forward for sure.
Nice. That's dope. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Randall Parks, Randall in San Diego, Randall Parks in LinkedIn. Check him out. DM if you got any questions, man. He's a good tool for your toolbox. I got him as one of my point of contacts if I ever need anything. Hey, I appreciate what you did for me and my family. We're eternally grateful, man. You're in our prayers, and I hope that you're doing well out there in San Diego. I know you are making that big ball of money. You know what I'm saying? I know you are. But anyways,
Big ball of
ladies and
money doesn't
gentlemen,
go as far in San Diego.
that's a good point actually. You know that Washington state tax is 9.4?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Anyways, that's another conversation, but that's a conversation we'll decide. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Pit Talk, pulling pits and opinions with your host, Gunny G, and we out.
Take care.
Randall. Absolutely, man. I'll call you later. Thank you for coming on.
You're welcome, brother.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.